Hey, welcome everybody. Welcome back to a new episode of Design System Social Club. Today we're going to talk about jobs, finding jobs, recruiting for jobs for design system. And to help me talk about that today, I have Katie with us. Hi, Katie.
Hi.
So Katie is, or was actually, I want to say, was a principal UX eng at Car Gurus. She's in transition now, and next Tuesday, she'll be a senior designer for GitHub and Primer, the design system there. Exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. Hi, Katie.
Hi.
And we also have today, we have Danny to talk with us. Hey, Danny.
Hello.
Danny is a principal design technologist at AWS Amplify, and he's also the creator of Style Dictionary. And if you don't know what Style Dictionary is, it's a design token management tool. Honestly, if you don't know what that is at this point, I'm wondering why you're here, but that's maybe another
Thanks.
another subject. Anyway, we're going to talk about jobs today, finding jobs, recruiting for jobs. I think on this particular call, I'm the only hiring manager officially to hire for design system people, but maybe we can talk about that a little bit. And maybe to kick us off, I want to ask you like a first question, because in my mind, and this is maybe like a personal observation, but design system roles have a tendency to actually attract hybrids people. And I think all three of us are hybrids, meaning that we're both designers and developers. Do you have any opinion on that? What did you notice, or do you have an explanation around this? Who wants to start?
I can start. I think I have a somewhat good explanation. I think the reason why I think a lot of hybrids are drawn to design systems and design system teams is because you're building tools and products and mechanisms for other designers and developers. So you need to kind of think like a designer because you're designing the experience of using UI components. And so you need to kind of think about like the customer experience, but you also need to think about it from a developer or designer's perspective. So you really kind of need to kind of marry the two disciplines and really think through like the developer experience of using the UI components, or like the ergonomics of a documentation site or something like that. So it's really it really blends those two disciplines very well together. At least that's kind of my opinion.
Yeah, makes sense. Katie,
Yeah.
what do you think?
I totally agree. To add to that, coming from like a smaller company perspective, design systems teams are often very small, and sometimes it's just one or two people. So that kind of lends towards like a hybrid role because you're often wearing many hats. I should have worn my many hats shirt today. And you're like responsible for many different aspects of the design system if you're on a smaller team. So if you're able to kind of handle both the design and engineering side of things, you're going to be more successful and there will be more opportunities for you.
Yeah, totally agree with what you're saying, Katie. And I think, like I said that before, but I'm obviously not the only one to say that usually it feels like when you work on a design system, and especially if you work in a startup, you're a startup inside the startup, or, it's like you're trying to, I very rarely heard about, as you mentioned, like a design system team that would be like just so many people, right? So I feel like, yes, it needs to be, wearing multiple hats. It feels like that anyway in my previous experience, that you have to do a little bit of everything. And that kind of tends to draw people that can do a little bit of everything, or have, like possibility to expand a little bit their role. So, and I think it's interesting because, well, for example, so for the audience that doesn't know, I work for Intuit and I work for IDS, the Intuit design system. I was hired as a principal designer. Now I'm a UX manager, and like you basically go back and forth those two things. And anyway, cool. Well, maybe we can move on to talking about some like finding a role and finding a job in a design system. And well, last time I looked for a job, it was basically during COVID, so it was a little bit different, I think. That said, Katie, you just moved to GitHub, so why don't you start with that and maybe tell us a little bit about your experience recently.
Yeah. So for me, I actually found the actual job posting for the primer opening on Twitter.
Mhm.
I feel like Twitter is a really great place to be networking for design systems roles because it's a pretty small community and there's not a lot of job openings all the time. I think that's changing now, but it's kind of rare to see something pop up, especially for something like GitHub Primer. So for me, that just kind of caught my eye immediately on Twitter. I had a connection, like somebody I knew that knew somebody who worked there. So I used my network and basically asked that person to see if they could reach out to their connection at GitHub and send my portfolio along. I don't know if that's the reason why they ended up talking to me, but it never hurts to use your network to try to get an in, because companies like GitHub and similar size companies for design systems roles, since they are like don't come across very often, they probably get a lot of applications. So they're sifting through a lot of stuff. So anything you can do to try to get yourself out there and get them to actually see your portfolio or your resume or your cover letter, which I definitely recommend spending a lot of time on. You should do that. Just take the risk in asking people to do that for you. So that's what I did. And that's kind of how I got started with the whole interview process with them.
Nice. Well, first of all, congrats, or congrats
Thanks.
again, I should say. But what do you think is maybe like specific to design system jobs? Obviously it's very niche, right? But is there anything that you feel is somewhat different than a regular product designer role, or maybe a software engineer role? Is there anything specific you feel like you need to do differently or present differently?
Yeah, I think it depends on the role in the company. If it's a larger team that is hiring, like they might be open to hiring somebody with no prior experience working on a design system, then I think the interview process and the application process is probably similar to like a front end role or just a product design role. But if they're looking for like a senior or staff level, they're going to want to see that you have previous experience. I've seen a lot of people in the hiring space say that you will stand out if you were somebody who actually built a system up from the ground, or like started a system as kind of like a side project at your full-time job, or was like you were scrappy with it in some way, something to make you stand out that shows that you were just like genuinely interested in design systems and were, pursued it, even though maybe your current role didn't really have that opportunity for you. That can kind of help you stand out in that way. And I think that's something they might be looking for, but it really depends on the team.
Yeah, and to kind of add on to that, like the hiring process at like larger companies and stuff like that is generally like, at least for Amazon, most like roles are supposed to be like fungible. So like a design technologist should be able to go to any team with a design technologist open role, roughly speaking. I mean, there definitely are, expertises kind of within each kind of role and like job family and stuff like that. But definitely with like larger companies, just kind of more of the core skill set of the type of role that they're hiring for. But I think definitely having some experience with working on a design system is a huge plus for hiring if that's the job you're going for.
Yeah. So Donna was asking us online, were you looking for a long time, Katie, before you found this role? That's maybe.
I wasn't really looking. I was kind of open to an opportunity that would be worth it, I guess, like something that really stood out to me. Like I wanted my next move to be something that was going to be very meaningful to me in my career. So I got lucky when it popped up, honestly.
Good. Yeah. And to be honest with you, it reminds me kind of like, so I joined into it a little bit over a year ago. And well, to talk, like it's slightly a different story than yours, Katie, but at the same time, I can see also, some common ground. So mine was not on Twitter; it was actually on LinkedIn. But basically,
LinkedIn.
yeah,
People
I know,
use
right?
that.
It works. And basically, what happened is that so the whole story is that I built the design system on my previous company, ThoughtSpot startup in Sunnyvale. And unfortunately, COVID hit. They had to get rid of 12% of the people there. That's how I got laid off. And silver lining all the way for me anyway. But anyway, so I lost my job kind of abruptly. And in 3 weeks, I found a new one at Intuit. And that is mostly because of my network. So, I mean, I think it's even more critical because design system is so niche. Like it's a really small world. And I feel like a lot of people know a lot of people. And what happened is that Leonardo, my future manager, basically posted, like this role of principal designer on LinkedIn, and a recruiter that I knew basically just tagged me in the comments. It says just my name. That's it.
Wow.
And this is all it took to actually get in touch with Leonardo and talk with him and say, hey, this is what I do. This is what I've done in the past, and that's how it worked. It's like it can be like as simple and quick as that, but obviously it helps when you already have a previous experience. In my mind, also maybe there is might be some kind of difficulty in especially in bigger organization like Amazon or Intuit, and I'm guessing GitHub too, but you don't really have any experience for now, is the fact that when you're hiring for the design system, and I'm going to talk about my personal experience at Intuit, but the breadth of all the products that we have at Intuit kind of bias you to actually hire somebody that is already knowing the land. Meaning that maybe if you want to have a designer join your team, if I need to compare between somebody that worked already at Intuit and knows at least very well one of the products, it helps rather than hiring somebody totally new. So that might be a bias, like maybe there's more people in bigger companies that are welcome directly internally and not externally. Because, I mean, I got lucky, but I think you basically need to prove that you have a certain set of expertise or, like a domain that they need. Otherwise, there's a chance that they actually would prefer somebody that already know, like the territory. Does that make sense to you?
I think so. I think there's also like a flip side to that as well. Like that person could be kind of too close to the product and kind of not be able to get their thinking outside of their previous experience. And so it could actually serve as a detriment when they go to kind of like a systems team that now needs to work across many different organizations and teams and types of products and stuff like that. So depending on the type of person, if they're able to kind of zone out their thinking, then I think it could be good to have that experience. But some people could be kind of too stuck in their existing way of kind of understanding how that product and kind of the world for that product works to not be able to think at a broader scale.
Yeah. Oh, playing favorite.
Yeah, or playing favorite. That's actually a good point. One of the things that I've always tried to get teams within kind of design system teams within Amazon that serve kind of multiple products or multiple teams to get out of the space of having a first customer or a first and best customer. Our primary customer is this team, but any other team, could use us, but most of the support will go to this team. And then you kind of get this biased system that's kind of, doesn't quite work for other people, but it doesn't not work for other people, and you get this kind of weird mediocre success, but it still kind of just limps along for a while.
Yeah, almost feel like a first class and second class citizen, basically in the design system land. So yeah. Okay, cool. Well, apart from that, so I feel like basically from Katie's story and mine, network is probably the most crucial thing. We talked about Twitter, obviously, and it's also yes, it's easy to say Twitter, but I'm just thinking about somebody that just is out of college or something like that and wants to start something. It's sometimes it's not easy to engage, build your network on Twitter and just say, hey, I want to participate, and and having, like a point of view or maybe something interesting to say about things. So, like I don't know if you guys experience anything like that, or you feel like, is there a good way to start building your network? I also know, sorry, go ahead, Katie. I feel like you wanted
Well,
to.
it's hard with COVID, but I'm a huge fan of meetups, and I organize one. I did just move to San Diego, but I organized one in Boston called Ladies at UX Boston. Obviously, it's fully remote right now, but when we were in person, that is just such a great way to meet new people, and it's so low pressure. Depending on the meetup, I think our meetup was pretty friendly, and we had a lot of like entry level designers coming in. It's Boston, so there's a lot of students around. Just getting that like face-to-face interaction with somebody who's been in the industry for a while, and just like they want to talk about themselves and their career, just getting to ask them questions about it is so like eye-opening for somebody trying to get a new role or just learn about a new like aspect of engineering or design or anything. So meetups are huge. Once we're back in person, I think it'll be better, but there are tons of virtual ones now, and some of them are super high tech, and they use like hop-ins, so you can do like one-on-one video chats with people, and that's kind of a nice way to network. That's not like it as I think it's much less intimidating than Twitter. Twitter's a pretty scary place to be putting your opinions out on. So
Twitter is a very scary place, yes. Yeah, and to kind of add on to that, like, I mean, Clarity last year was virtual, and they had a really good system of like being able to kind of book like 5 or 10 minute, like lightning chats with people. And so like I met a bunch of people last year through that. I'm assuming they're probably going to do that this year as well. There are still tickets to Clarity if you haven't gotten your ticket yet. Nice little plug there. I think also like with Twitter, like, you don't necessarily have to be like the one engaging. Like, you can join Twitter and follow like a design systems list or something like that, and most people will like, they'll tweet out their job openings, and a lot of people will kind of retweet it, or like you can kind of build your network, or at least build like what jobs are available through Twitter, even if you're not like actively posting and like talking to people and stuff like that. You can at least get kind of a job board almost from just following like a design systems Twitter list or something.
Yeah.
I think also as well, like the design system Slack, there's a job openings channel that you can join and just see what all the job openings are. That's another good resource as well.
that's the first
for sure.
place I would go right now if I were looking for a role, just because there's jobs like every day in that Slack, and they're a lot of times posted by people who work there, and they want to talk to you. So like they always say like DM me with questions. That's a way to get a reference internally to a company that you don't know anybody at. Just have a conversation with the person who posted the job, and maybe they'll be able to refer you, or maybe you'll find out it's not a role that is interesting to me, or maybe it is. So I would definitely recommend joining that Slack if you're somebody looking to get into the industry.
Yeah. Donna is making a very good comment also, like meetups in real life also means you start to see the same people. It's very true. Especially if you're an introvert and you have like problems to just go and talk with somebody. But if it's the second time, the third time that you see, like regulars, I feel like, yes, it's easier than to just, wave, say hi, maybe say something from last time. Yeah, definitely helps. I also know that personally growing my network, well, first of all, I moved to the US 7 years ago, but back in France and back in Paris, Twitter was basically kind of like the only way for me to be aware of what was happening, and especially in the US and especially in Silicon Valley. So that was my way to, get news at that point anyway. But then when I moved here, definitely meetups were helping. And I just want to say that I went to meetups that was like, and it was a fail. It's like I tried, but not my vibe, not the right people, not necessarily, like a topic like, but yes, you need to make a little bit of investment before, finding your network, your peeps, for sure. I definitely met, well, Danny, for example, we met at the Design System Wednesday meetup back when he was, in real life, and we were all going to, every month we were going to a different company talking about design system. That was like probably the best way for me to grow my network at that point. I also remember meeting Kelly, who unfortunately cannot be with us today because he had some personal issue. But like I met him at a SaaS meetup, and this is just how you actually get to know people and talk a little bit what you do and what they do and things like that. So it can happen very organically. I feel for people that are a little bit more introvert because it's not particularly easy, but it definitely pays off, I think.
I am an introvert, and when I go to meetups, I mean, sometimes you should just be okay with going and not talking to anybody. It's okay if that happens. But I usually go, when I would go in person, I would go with the goal of talking to at least one person, like just awkwardly walking up to at least one person and introducing myself. And if I did that, I would feel really good about it. And I would want to go back to the next meetup or start, like, try a different meetup. So just like kind of, you have to give yourself these little icebreaker assignments to get into it, or just be comfortable sitting alone, and it's okay. It's perfectly fine if that's what you want to do.
Actually, maybe there's a hack that you gave already, is like, if you're too introvert or too shy to talk to people, organizing a meetup can be a
There you
great
go.
way.
You don't have to talk to anybody.
Yeah, but like, you have something to do, and it's
Yes.
interesting because I don't know, like, if you would ask my wife, she would say that I'm an introvert, but I'm also very, I guess, warm and open in social like meetups and stuff like that, like in social situation. I think that there's a difference between, like, when you're an introvert, for me, means that I need my alone time, and talking with a lot of people have a tendency to drain my energy, and it's not energizing, like, I guess, like extrovert people are. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that like, if you're passionate also by the subject, I think it helps to go and talk with people. So
one thing you just reminded me of too, as like being an organizer of a meetup, being a speaker at a meetup is another really great way to get people to just talk to you by default. Like, you usually don't have to approach people. They will usually come up to you. That could be virtual too, because if you do a virtual talk, people will add you on LinkedIn after, or Twitter, get your Twitter followers, and like chat with you. So even if it's just like a 5-minute quick tech talk or something at a small meetup, it's a good way to get to meet people.
Yep. That's what I was gonna say. That's one of the reasons why I like giving talks, is like, I don't have to, like, come up with the icebreaker or whatever. Like, I can go up and like talk to a bunch of people, and then afterwards people will talk to me about the thing that I just talked about. So I don't need to put in as much effort, I guess, which is kind of a lazy way to think about it. But I'm also an introvert, and so kind of definitely whatever like I can do to make it easier for me to kind of interact with people in real life. I think one of the things as well is like, it's not weird to like come up to someone and be like, hey, I know you on Twitter, or like, like, I know you from like, the virtual world somewhere, like I liked your blog post on whatever, or your library about something. Like, you can kind of use those like connections, like if you know the person in like some virtual context. I have some really great friends that I started knowing through like Twitter and through GitHub and stuff like that, and then we know each other's families now. We've gotten dinner, but we kind of use that like, hey, we've interacted on Twitter a couple times, let's meet up and chat and stuff like that. So it's not weird to go up to people if you like know them on Twitter or something.
I was actually about to ask you, Danny, like, another vector that is possible is actually contributing to open source.
Yep.
Do you have like any experience with that, where like you feel like you actually grow your network through that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, building an open source library that other people use is very helpful, but also like a lot of people that have like contributed to like Style Dictionary, I've started kind of talking, I guess not offline, but sort of like off of the library itself, and we've kind of, worked on other projects and stuff like that. So, most like at least smaller open source projects are very open to people contributing and getting to know people in that way. So that's definitely another good way to like kind of get in to like a network or kind of an industry or community or something like that, is just start to be active in the GitHub, and then you can start to know people through that.
I feel like that's really huge in Figma as well right now. Like on the design side of things, Figma community is all about like sharing files with other people. Basically, you can create like templates, you could build plugins. There's kind of a lot of stuff you could do to contribute back to the Figma community that can easily blow up on Twitter if that's what you're looking for and you're like, I need this one thing and I haven't been able to find it. I will make it and I'll share it out. Sometimes those things just like take off and you can gain a lot of traction that way and meet a lot of people just by sharing Figma resources.
Yep.
That's a great point. Earlier, I wanted also to give a little tip to all the meetup organizers and help out introvert. Back when I created the interface which was a meetup for South Bay designers and front-end developers. And one thing that we tried with some success is that when you had, a period of time when it was more devoted to networking, we had tables, and on each table we had like a whiteboard where we would put up like topics. So you would know and have a way to jumpstart the conversation, because basically if you were joining that table, you were going to talk about design tokens or accessibility or I don't know, pretty much anything that we were thinking about. It could be related to the theme of the night also or something like that. But it was just a way to skip the awkwardness of saying, hi, what do you do? But anyway, that's a way also to break up the ice and just start talking about something that you care about or you're passionate about, which helps in my experience. Anyway,
also
cool.
Going to workshops as well, because workshops are generally a smaller thing than kind of just going to a talk, and usually kind of the workshop organizers will have stuff for people to kind of interact together and stuff like that. So attending workshops is also another good way to start to build your network.
Yep. Great point. By the way, we did mention very quickly that Slack is probably the best way to find design system jobs, but at the same time, which one? So
the only one.
There are more than one. The one that has like 10,000 people in it.
I can only handle one, I think.
Yeah.
So maybe later on I will put either in comments or in the description of this video the link to the basically the design system Slack. How do you call it? Is it a workspace? What's the name?
I just call it a Slack.
I just call it a Slack. I think it's a workspace.
Yeah, probably. I'm not sure anymore. That said, the main problem that with Slack communities is that, except if you get lucky, then somebody has to pay for it, and that can be a little bit hard. Do you know any other platform like Discord or something like that you use that could be potentially a good place to go?
Yeah, Discord would probably be like the next best thing. It's free to use, so it's easier for smaller communities to just start up a Discord server. I know that a lot of open source communities use Discord as kind of like the main communication channel because it is a lower barrier of entry usually than Slack. So I would say that that's kind of the main one. I've heard of a couple other ones like, was it Glitter or Glimmer, something like that. I don't think I've seen it that much though, but Discord is definitely the next best thing.
Yep. But I mean, personally, I know of it, but I've never actually, spent too much time on it. It's this kind of thing where I feel like I went there a couple of times and looked around, but didn't really find what I was looking for. But anyway, I think I found whoa, that's going to be hard to basically show it, but let me just try this. Like, this is the invite. That's really not. So I'll share it in the description, but this is basically the invite to join the Design Systems Slack channel. I think it's probably the place to go. But
you can just go to design.systems/Slack, and then you'll be able to get that link.
Okay, I'll find it later. I'll put it in the description of the video or something like that. Anyway, Okay, so Donna was asking, has anyone hired for the design system team? Yes, I have, and that was actually probably the a good segue to talk about that, because ironically, I feel like when people have trouble to find a job in design system, even though it's their passion, it's also super hard to recruit for design system role. So why is that? Well, personally, so I've been a hiring manager at ThoughtSpot. I've been a hiring manager at Intuit. Both time it was more towards UX engineering. So that's also a little bit maybe even more niche. Can I say nicher? I highly thought it. More niche. Nicher. It's nicher. Because it's design system, and inside of design system, it's UX engineers, which is like a weird practice of front end development.
It's not weird,
but
it's totally normal.
Okay, it's
it's more specialized.
Exactly. Yes,
yeah.
it's
we're
harder
not
to.
Weird.
No, we're not. Yes. Well, anyway, I'm struggling a lot to find. Yeah. Well, Donna has a very good term, micro niche. It's micro niche. Anyway, or maybe niche square, something like that. Anyway, the thing that I'm struggling with is that I feel, well, most of the time actually I talk with people that have like some experience, but as we mentioned before, if you have zero experience in building tools, like let's say you're a developer and you're a front-end developer, but you only built websites, well, it might it might still work, but it might not. But in my experience, I'm having a lot of trouble finding people and front-end developers that actually know what they're doing with HTML and CSS, which is kind of weird, because in a way you could say, like a lot of people are arguing, oh well, this is not really like programming languages, or it's so easy. But I feel like actually a lot of people don't understand the subtlety of HTML and CSS, and I'm going to be like pretty much transparent with that. Like my process, especially like for simpler role, like not necessarily full-time position, but contractors, for example, I have 3 steps: phone interview, technical like technical conversation, and then a panel interview with other roles and stuff like that. Usually where it stops is at the technical interview, and I'm asking something very simple, to recreate a component from scratch, from an image, and I would just want to understand how they work around it, like how they build it, how they're thinking about it, what is their strategy for the layout, the compromise that they're ready to make. And that's why I hate whiteboard interviews, so I'm trying to be as close as possible to the reality of the work, which is build components, most of the time anyway. And a lot of time I see people like, I don't know, I have some theories. Maybe it's because like to be more marketable, they actually go really fast on HTML and CSS, and they go through a boot camp and they know very well React. Good for them, but this is not really what I'm looking for. And so that's something that I actually struggling with a lot. And I remember a conversation in the first Design System Wednesday that I've been to. I was talking with I can't remember his last name, but Abby. That was at Eventbrite, but he moved to a different company now, and he's also a front-end tech lead. And he basically agreed with me, like it was actually hard to find people that know what we were talking about when we said, well, do you know what is like, I don't know, even simpler things like, okay, let me give you a good example that might slightly be technical, but when I see somebody using a div and just putting a display block, that's already a problem for me, because by default, you don't need to do that. So it basically means that you don't know what you're doing from this, from the top. So and I'll be honest.
Harsh.
I mean,
maybe they're nervous.
Or also, maybe they're used to having like a normalizer or a reset that does all unset, which actually turns divs into inline elements. if you didn't.
Yeah.
It's very
Like
nuanced.
that's a very interesting problem. So
And
they could be thinking
yes,
2 steps ahead of you.
it's true. And this is why it's a conversation. And like, like usually when I do that technical interview, I actually say there is not a perfect way to do this exercise. I want to understand how you think about it because I've seen it dozens of times. And like there are multiple strategies, there are compromise everywhere. So I want to understand why are you making that, like why are you doing what you're doing? There might be a very good reason, Danny, as you mentioned. It's true.
Mhm.
But most of the time when I try to dig, there's not a whole lot, like they're just trying out stuff and see what sticks. And so again, depending on the level that you're wanting to, hire, might be good enough, might not. But that's one of the things that I'm struggling with. Um, Now on the designer side, personally, I think the main difference that I see between what I would call product designer and system designer is, well, it sounds kind of obvious, but system thinking and how you need to embrace the globality of the system when you're thinking about like how do you want to design something for the system. So yeah, I feel like I'm rambling now, but do you guys have any I don't know, like any opinions or experience of what would make a good designer for a design system in your mind?
I think for me, it's like willingness to learn. There's a lot of, like not knowing certain nuances of certain things or not, being able to have certain experiences or certain skills, I think is fine. One of the things that one of my previous, like 3 or 4 managers ago kind of impressed upon me is like hire for the their like opportunity, not like what they are now. Like hire for what they could be. And so like they're one of the things that like Amazon does for like hiring like software developers, for example, is not necessarily hiring like, oh, we need a Java developer, so we need to hire a Java developer, but we can hire a Ruby developer as long as he's a good developer because people can learn languages very easily. And so kind of hiring for like, you know, their opportunity to be a good person in the role, but not necessarily like, oh, you've worked on design systems before, you know HTML and accessibility and CSS really well, etc. But can you learn those things easily? Potential. Sorry, that's the word I was looking for. Potential. Hiring for potential, not opportunity. Thank you, Donna.
Yeah. But it's true that like in my mind as a hiring manager, technical knowledge comes after the mindset. And that means exactly that, having a curiosity, being able to like learn fast and reuse something. Like for example, and that's the question that Donna is asking, what are some things that stood out to you or impressed you from candidates? Well, one thing for sure is that if I explained something to them and they're immediately able to reuse what I just explained somewhere else, that's great. That means they understood what we were talking about and they are able to reapply it directly. That's great. Also, sometimes I'm impressed by somebody that comes with, even though I've seen that exercise dozens of times, sometimes I see somebody that has a total different approach to it. And it's always interesting, like even for my personal knowledge, I'm like, okay, I didn't think about that. That's cool. So there's another, I think as a hiring manager, you also want to have, I can't remember exactly, I read that sentence somewhere, but you need to have complementary people in your team and, like as far from you as possible as you can actually handle. You see what I mean? It's
Mhm.
like if they're totally different than you might have like a really hard time to work with those, but you need to find that spot where it's like as far as possible from you and still being, like something that is working. Um, but anyway, yeah, that's yes.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say I think one of the things also for me, like, so I haven't been a hiring manager, but I've been on like interview loops and stuff like that for design technologists and designers and engineers and stuff like that, is like asking questions, like, and asking kind of the right questions. So like a lot of times for if I'm doing like a technical assessment or something like that, and we're doing like an exercise, kind of like you explain, like, build this component or something, you know, instead of just like jumping right into like, okay, I'm going to do this, this, and this, but like asking like, questions about, okay, like what are you trying to get out of this component? Like, what are the, error states, and, like, getting clarifying questions so that they're like actually kind of thinking about the entire problem versus just getting like, okay, this is what I'm presented with and I'm just going to go off and build this. So I want to see someone that like asks questions so that they have like a full understanding of like what they're trying to do versus just like, here's a task, go do that thing. If that makes sense.
Yep. I feel like there's a lot you can learn when you're interviewing somebody. If it's less, like, it depends on your interview process. There's usually several steps, but one of the steps could be a bit more around communication and just like literally having a discussion or having them do a written exercise about how they would design an API for a component. Like, you want to see that they can think through all the different edge cases and the different variants and props that they might want to extend to that thing. That I think you can learn a lot from, because if somebody has, no experience thinking outside of like just one design and how they would build that thing with HTML and CSS, they probably don't have experience with design systems or building component libraries. Maybe they aren't very interested in that and they would prefer to be in more of a standard build this one thing kind of role. So I think like having those conversations pretty quickly, like in the interview process, is very helpful. I also just want to say, because I've been on a lot of interviews for front-end engineers, and I was the CSS person at work, one of like two. So they would always get a little blindsided, I think, by my interview questions. But I always tried to get a read on just how the person felt about CSS, even if they weren't like super great at it. If they felt like they had an ego about it, like they were too good for it, I would kind of be like, this is not very impressive and I don't really want to work with you if that's going to be your attitude towards it. But if they were like, oh, I didn't know that thing you just told me, that's so cool, that's exciting. Or if they're like looking stuff up and just being excited about it, I think says a lot, and can set you up for success in a design systems role specifically.
Definitely, and not being sort of like dogmatic about certain things, like, oh, CSS is terrible, I only want to use like whatever, like, blank framework, or utility CSS frameworks are the only way to go and everything else is terrible. Like, in your opinion is bad if you don't think so. But being able to see that, hey, though some things are good in certain circumstances, some things are good in other circumstances. There's no like, this thing is better than this other thing, full stop. It's, that there's trade-offs for everything, and there's, a good time to use plain CSS. There's good times to use Sass or less. There's good times to use, potentially CSS and JS frameworks or other things. But like having a specific, like, this is the way you should build an application, like bar none, is not like a good kind of mindset to go about, especially with like design systems.
Right, because they're always evolving and you might need to change your opinion in a couple of years. Maybe you're a very strict CSS person, you don't want your CSS and your JS. That might change after a year or two of building a system and seeing people use it. So
exactly.
And it's more than just CSS. This will like transfer in other areas of the role too. So it's important to like keep an eye out for those things when you're interviewing, and as a person being interviewed, be mindful of your bias and opinion and try to remain open-minded and flexible.
Willingness to change your opinion is definitely a huge plus.
Let me ask you that question to both of you, because I have my personal opinion, but I think I stated that I personally hate, like whiteboarding interview, but at the same time, you do need to assess the level of technicity of the candidate. So in your mind, do you think it's better to have like written exercise that you do on your own time, maybe like a live coding challenge or something else? Like, what, in your experience, what is the best way to actually ask people and assess their technical knowledge?
It's a hot topic. I'm afraid to share my opinion because, like, my personal opinion, I would prefer to be working on something not in front of another person staring at me, making me uncomfortable. I would like to take my time, and I will only do that for a role that I really care about and that I want. So me saying that means that like every company asking for you to do that could be kind of unreasonable, because that's like a ton of work, and you're not being paid usually to do that work. So that's why I hesitate to share that opinion, because I know people are really against take-home work, but I like it as a candidate for a company that I really want to work for. But I also see the value. Like, I think you need both. Like, honestly, it depends, but if you can have some in-person time to work through a problem together, that's where you can really learn a lot about a person. But that's not the best. That's not how people perform their best all of the time. So it's good to have options if you can.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think to build on that, like being able to say, you know, I would prefer like take-home written test or a whiteboarding exercise or whatever as the kind of technical assessment, I think would be really good, because like you said, you know, I wouldn't like not be great doing like a whiteboarding exercise in front of a bunch of people. And also, like, I've never had to do that in my job. So like kind of testing me on that thing wouldn't be like useful to you. So like, you know, basically allowing the person to kind of show their skills in their own way. As long as like you're still getting the information that you need in terms of like hiring and stuff like that. But like everyone kind of has different, you know, working modes, and some people like working collaboratively, some people like kind of being heads down and then presenting something. Like there are different ways people like to work, and as long as it's not like super against how you need the person to work, then allow them to kind of, you know, do what is comfortable for them.
Yep. Well, I can share with you my experience of it, especially when I was hiring for at ThoughtSpot. In the end, what I was doing is I was actually giving the choice to the candidates. It was either you can do a written test, and you know, like I would basically also there's something to say about written tests, is that if you make them too big, then there's a bias against people that maybe don't have enough time. You know, like if you have all the time in the world and you can spend 48 hours on this thing, it will gonna look much better than somebody that can spend 2 hours on it because they have a family to raise, because they're already working two shifts, or I don't know. You know, it's like, so there is a risk there with the written test in my mind. So this is also why I liked personally to give the option, say, hey, we can do like a 45 minutes, an hour, you know, like live coding exercise together, and I will, you know, make it as enjoyable as possible. I will try my best to make it casual and talk about, you know, like the work, and trying to have some kind of conversation. Or if you prefer, and you know, I can understand, I'm the one who can freeze if you're asking me, you know, like just a question like that, you know, like especially if it's not in front of a computer, but you know, like on the whiteboard. But you know, it's like giving that option. It's interesting because, you know, I want to say when I did that, most people, maybe 9 out of 10, were choosing the written exercise because it's less stressful, but some don't. And on the other hand, when I'm hiring for contractors, usually I get the feedback from recruiters say, hey, written test is just too long. It's just like it's too big of an investment for a contractor role. So most of the time, they actually prefer to do like a quick live coding exercise. So no cookie cutter there, but I find it interesting. And if I could, I would, you know, like if we would have, I don't know, some kind of certification, so we could do without assessing, you know, the person level in technical skills, I would. But the reality of it is that, you know, like that's another part, you know, like, and it's coming from, you know, me interviewing people over time, and how sometimes when you have somebody on the phone, they sound great. They always say, oh yeah, totally, like I totally get what you're saying, or yes, yes, I know everything about this thing. But then when you try to probe it, you're like, are you the same person that I talked to? Like, you know, it's like I understand the need, and you know, like basically you're really trying to find a job and you have a lot of pressure and you want to make it. But ultimately, I think it's important also to be able to be honest and reasonable with yourself and say, actually, that might not be a good fit for me. You know, I know it's hard. I truly do. but I think it happens a lot of the times where you're surprised by, once you actually try to talk about the reality of the job with those people. So yeah, have you ever experienced this kind of stuff? This kind of situation where you're like, we talked before, and I thought you would know this kind of stuff.
Maybe
that's just me.
I think that's a hiring manager thing where you have I've never done like an initial phone screening and have been blindsided by somebody's, demeanor after.
Well, yeah. Well, maybe as a hiring manager, here's a tip for, like people watching this video stream, is that try to be honest. I know it's hard, but try to be honest and say, I don't know this, or maybe it's not a good fit for me. Yeah, exactly.
But also, because I'm not a hiring manager and I can say this, you should take on a little bit more than you think that you're capable of, because you can learn stuff on the job. So if you're like, I'm totally underqualified for this, I'm not even going to apply. No, everybody's underqualified. You'll figure it out when you get there. As long as you're yourself and you're honest, I think that will come across when you're discussing the role with the hiring manager.
Yep.
Don't lie.
Sure. Yeah. So Gabrielle is asking us a question. On the flip side, what are some things you look for when applying for a DS role? That's a good one. Who wants to?
Resources. I want to see that there's a team that is being invested in by the company, and it's not it can be a struggle a little bit. It's always going to be a little bit of a struggle, but I want it to be not as much of a struggle at the point that I'm joining the team. At this point in my career, maybe you're somebody who wants to just get into it and you want to be the person that builds the thing from the ground up. Then you would, you would look for opportunity. But I would be looking for an established team with resources.
Yeah, and similar kind of to that as well. One of the things I generally like to ask is how is success defined for this team in this role? So some teams. And sometimes it catches people off guard, we don't know. We're just kind of building a design system and people are using it. And so we're going to keep building it and keep building what people need, but not having clear goals and kind of success criteria of okay, if I join this team, what would I be kind of judged by to show that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, or that I'm being beneficial to the team. Because, sometimes that can be kind of, especially in design systems, that can be sometimes nebulous. A lot of design system teams don't have clear, visions or success criteria, and kind of jumping onto, a ship that doesn't have direction can be difficult.
Yep. To me, it's a sign of maturity of the design system if you have a clear idea of success metrics, because as we said, most of the time it's actually something that is a bit scrappy at the beginning, and you have to choose where you want to put your effort in. And in my experience, it's rarely starting by saying, oh, we need, having success metrics in place already so that we know, how do we measure success? I think everybody wants it, but it's hard to actually have the time to put it in place. And I totally agree with you, Danny. I think it's a great sign. Let's just put it this way. If they know what they're talking about, then it means that they're probably at a certain level of maturity of the system.
And it doesn't need to necessarily be like OKRs or we're gonna increase revenue, but it doesn't need to be super businessy metrics either, but just having a clear vision and kind of what you're shooting for and kind of how you're gonna judge if you get there is fine. It doesn't need to be we're gonna save 1 million dev hours a year or something like that.
Sorry,
Oh, no worries. I think along those same lines, you might want to look at where the team sits in the org, if you can kind of figure that out. So does it report into engineering or design, or neither, or both? And what do you want to do? Do you want to be more of a designer, an engineer, or both? That would kind of if you're looking for a hybrid role, it could really go either way, but look at the leadership on the team and figure out, because that will also kind of be how you're judged, your own career growth. But do you want to grow more as a designer? Maybe you want to see that design is more involved than engineering. So definitely trying to figure out where the org structure leans, because it can be all over the place. I think every company does it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also kind of internally within like the design system team, is it comprised of designers and engineers and product managers and QA? Is it just, designers under one team and developers under another team? Like, what is kind of the makeup of the design system team itself? And that's actually a good, you brought up a good question, like where does it report up into? I know that's kind of something that Christoph, like what we've talked about before, is like, where should a design systems team sit? Should it sit in a design org, in a development org, in neither?
Yeah, platform would be another
Platform.
another
yeah.
one. Yeah,
I think
like
if the team is diverse enough, like you said, if it has like all of those different pieces, which I've never experienced personally, it might not matter as much where it sits because you're getting that like level, you're getting that experience from all the different sides. But if it's like super eng heavy and you actually don't have any design resources and you want to like learn more about design and grow as a designer, you're gonna struggle, I think, if it's reporting into engineering.
Yeah.
Another way to look at it, and that's probably my answer to Gabriel, is governance. I'll be curious to know how's the governance of that design system, who's making decisions exactly, and how clear you are with who make what decisions, because that can also be very critical for your success, like in that team, and having a clear idea of, again, who's calling the shots. Which is, obviously close to what we all discussed already, but it's just another way to put it. What is the governance model of your design system? And if they don't have a clear answer, that might be a red flag to me.
Yep.
Anyway,
exactly. And kind of like the I guess it's similar to governance, but kind of like what the ownership model is. Like because governance could just be like anyone can necessarily make a decision, but also this team kind of owns that decision, but maybe the team doesn't own that decision at all either. So just kind of knowing like who owns what, and it also gets back to kind of organizational structure as well. Maybe the design system team owns this stuff, but there's this other team that owns this part of it as well. Or, there can be kind of some confusion and some overlap depending on how the org is structured.
Yep. And just so, Gabrielle was basically saying, great points, thank you. All the listings look so shiny. Well, yeah, they always, like we are selling something. So obviously we're not saying, hey, come work with us. It's a mess. Enjoy it.
I mean,
But,
unless you want to clean up a mess, some people want to clean up a mess, and that could be one selling point.
That said, something that I like to remind everybody every time I talk about design system is that I've never heard of a design system team that was like, we got it all under control.
We're done.
It's it's like it just works.
Yep.
Just so
keep it on.
Yes, exactly.
And one of the things that I just thought of as well is like career path for because design systems is kind of a niche thing, and the teams are generally more niche, and you don't have like as much of a structure of like, okay, there's principal designers and senior designers and like junior designers, and you have like all these people. It's you have a couple designers, a couple engineers, a couple design technologists maybe. So knowing that like your career path and kind of career ladder is is looked upon, or like is I guess overviewed by like your managers, so that you can level up, because some people could join a team and kind of get stagnant and not be able to like reach the next level because of how their team is structured. So making sure that opportunity or role has a clear career path to level up.
Yeah, I love that. I think it makes a lot of sense. And at the same time, I feel like, design system is still a new thing. So by the time that HR will actually catch up on, growth ladders and opportunities like that, I feel like we still need to, again, be a little bit scrappy. But I definitely hear you around like maybe also like working on the design system shouldn't be necessarily a long-term career path. Like you do that for a time, and then after that you go back to, I don't know, if you're a designer or product designer or something like that, there's nothing wrong with that. I just feel like, but it's true that maybe because there's not necessarily a whole lot of people working in that anyway, opportunities are rare, and especially even like once you're inside of a team, it's going to be hard to, basically have an opportunity there, except if you're lucky enough to be able to grow that team and have more people working on it. But that doesn't always happen. Anyway, we've been talking for over an hour now, and so I wanted to kind of like wind down by showing you a couple of things that might be a good idea. So first of all, I'm going to try. Sorry, I'm going to try to find what I was looking for. Yes, there we go. So here we are, new thing. I just wanted, like shameless plug, but this is open roles for people, teams where we have our regular, guests on this show that actually work in those companies. So Donna has right now, she works for TELUS and TELUS Digital, and they have a senior full stack developer UI design system position. So I will put that on the description of the show also. And then what else do we have? I know that, yeah. So Gina has a bunch of open position right now, product designer, and then there's a software engineer for the design system of Asana, and then there's an engineering manager for the design system of Asana. So I think, Asana is a cool product. Who wouldn't want to work with Gina? So I think it would definitely be like a good, like if I were looking for a role like that, I would definitely look into it. Another thing that I was thinking about recently is that I don't know if you know that, but I will try to say that's Mae Capuzzi. That's how I would say it anyway. And all my apologies if it was not correct. But Mae is doing a newsletter right now on design system, and very frequently she actually have a design system jobs newsletter. So if you're looking for a job, might be a good way also to get things that you didn't see coming through Twitter or LinkedIn or something like that. So that's another possibility. Last bit, and I'm just going to show you this one, but it might be good also to just, if you don't want to look at LinkedIn or I don't know, like Indeed or like mainstream stuff, this is basically a VC website. And every VC have their own portfolio of, basically companies or startups that they have that potentially have, roles that you didn't see elsewhere. So as a little tip, it might be good to actually go and check VC websites, and they have their portfolios, and sometimes like this here in Coast Live Ventures, but they have a carrier. It's like when you look at their portfolio, they can also show you, their companies or their carriers. So it might be another good thing, and it's something a little bit different to try if you're looking for, especially obviously working for a startup. So yeah, that's kind of like the ideas that I have that could be a little bit different from like your mainstream ideas. Anything else, guys, you wanted to add or ideas?
Amazon has tons of open roles. I actually just pinged our design system Slack channel, and I have like around 20 different job openings at different places at different design system teams within Amazon. So if you want to work in design systems at Amazon, there are plenty of, design technologists, designers, engineers, product managers. You can just DM me or, ping me on the Slack or Twitter, and I'll get you hooked up.
Yep. And maybe something that we didn't talk about is that cold email works. It works sometimes. Like, this is how I got my job at ThoughtSpot. So, it's
That's
like...
actually, that's how I got my job now.
Yeah, exactly.
I just
so
emailed a manager at the AWS Amplify team. I was like, I like Amplify. Can I go work over there? And then I started talking to people. So, even if there's not necessarily a job opening, still, if you really like a product or a design system team that you want to work on, it doesn't hurt to email the person in charge over there and at least get the conversation started.
Yep, for sure. Cool. Great. Well, I think we're basically over time. Let's just put it this way. So thank you very much, Katie and Danny, for your time today. I think we talked about a lot of things that hopefully will help other people to find job, recruit for a job in design system. I'm gonna say, crossing fingers that all those companies and all those teams will continue to grow, so we can actually have even more people joining the fun of building design systems. And I don't know. Do you have any final words, or I don't know, words of encouragement for the people out there looking for design system roles?
Be yourself. There's not a lot of us, so I think if you're just yourself and you're a hybrid and you're really interested in this space, just show that in some way, and you'll hopefully stand out from the crowd.
Yeah, and
Great advice.
be honest with yourself, like what you want in your career and kind of what you want to look for in a team and what you want to do. If you want, get a career coach. That actually helped me find kind of what I really wanted to do and find my next job role. So that could be something to think about as well. But do some soul searching to figure out what you're passionate about within design systems.
Makes sense. Thank you very much, both of you, for your time today, and it was super fun to have you once again here. I'm going to end up with the traditional stay fresh cheese bags and see you around.
All right.
Bye.
See ya. Bye, everyone.